So the question is whether thermal comfort should be a luxury or not. We are beyond that. It has become a necessity for our survival. And the situation is not the same when it comes to the Indian cities, where Indian cities end up facing much, much more extreme heat. And also the aspect of cooling is not something which is part and parcel of the or integrated within the buildings. So it's the good news is at least the range of solution which currently exists, and at the global scale, the Cool Coalition, a 120 organization partnership led by United Nations Environment Program, released a comprehensive guide to sustainable urban cooling in the climate change conference in the COP, which happened in Glasgow. To make it even more actionable, the Adrian R. Rockefeller Foundation, Resilience Center, and the Cool Coalition launched the online heat action platform at the World Economic Forum. So this tool will make it much more easier for policymakers and also for planners to identify the solutions most relevant to their context and communities, and also go towards implementing them. In India, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, along with National Institute of Urban Affairs, in partnership with United Nations Environment Program and RM Rocky Mountain Institute, are in the process of establishing the urban cooling program to make it much more easier for cities to understand and also take actions with respect to heat, but also with respect to the raising demand in terms of the energy consumptions. So today we will hear more about these efforts, and we have a wonderful list of panelists who are going to deliberate around these actions and what's happening within the cities, what's happening at the national government, what are these, what's being done by development banks, and also some of the development partners who are working with the cities. So before we start with that, let's start with a short video that presents the newly launched Heat Action platform. Can we have the video played?
The world is getting hotter. Heat impacts everyone, everywhere. From our health to students' ability to learn and to our work. But we can protect our communities and our planet from the rising heat by improving city planning, urban infrastructure, and early warning systems. Created by some of the world's top heat and cooling experts, the Heat Action Platform is a comprehensive resource where anyone can find partners and solutions. The platform shows you how to identify impacts and how to implement, monitor, and evaluate your projects. With the best technologies, it includes a filterable tool that allows you to find policies and projects that work best for your city. And it connects you with partners, experts, and organizations that can offer assistance for your projects, help accessing financing, and successful solutions for protecting your communities. We want to see this tool used everywhere in the world to protect people from the worst impacts of heat. Climate change puts everyone at risk, but together we can create a more heat-resilient world. Dive in today.
Thank you. As you can see from the video, the Heat Action Plan is currently designed to cater to a varied sector of stakeholders, including municipal officials, practitioners, financial institutions, and also tailor-made solutions to both human and economic impacts, to address the human and economic impacts of the extreme heat. It is intended to be a growing platform, so it's going to evolve over time, so it's not going to be something static. And it also has currently a few partners, but even the partners network is expected to grow over time. So, given this, now I would like to introduce the first speaker for today, Shri Sanjay Kumarji. He's the Additional Secretary and is also managing the Amrut and International Cooperation within the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India. Sir, over to you.
respected speakers on the dais and distinguished guests. On behalf of Government of India, I extend a very warm good afternoon to all of you. Already the impact and importance of heat in urban area has been outlined. And in that context, today's discussions are extremely important and timely. As we are deliberating here, there is a strong impact of heat wave in major parts of the globe, including Indian cities. We are aware that India houses, being a second most populous nation and having most of the densely populated cities, makes our challenge even tougher. Millions of people in our cities are experiencing the impact of this heat wave. Of course, we are not stranger to hot temperatures and heat in urban areas, but still the occurrence and frequency has increased over time. And particularly this year, the heat wave struck quite early in the month of March. In fact, it adversely impacted the production of wheat in the rural areas, and it is much longer as compared to the previous years. Not the least, it not only impacts human health and productivity, but also other aspects of energy security and economic development. Need of space cooling and consequent energy requirement is growing rapidly in India. It is expected to reach 8 times with respect to the requirement today by 2037. Further, the studies suggest that this may reduce our GDP or adversely impact our GDP by 2 percentage points, which can drive millions out of job, making it far more difficult for the poor in the country to come out of the clutches of poverty. As far as access to cooling is concerned, it's close to 10% in India, and we have to make efforts to make it available to majority of our population. Therefore, in such a scenario, access to thermal comfort cannot be viewed as a luxury. Increasing access to sustainable cooling is a necessity to build resilience of our communities to tackle extreme heat conditions. But we are aware that air conditioners are extremely energy hungry and they cannot be treated as solution in the long term. We need to accelerate equitable access to cooling. This requires a comprehensive approach from the entire global community. We need to invest in biodiverse urban nature, energy security, better building and urban design, emergency heat wave measures and low-tech cooling solutions. As a responsible member of the global community, India is making big-time investment in solar energy. In fact, India is home to the world's largest solar park. We have also founded International Solar Alliance comprising of 106 countries. The idea is to nudge the member countries towards this noble cause and facilitate technology transfer. Moreover, we are also working towards energy conservation in urban areas. As part of Amrut mission, we are subsidizing the replacement of traditional bulbs and tubes with LEDs in both public and private spaces. Climate Smart Project and Indo-German collaboration is promoting energy efficient building designs in addition to building capacities of our urban planners. Many cities are making progress in development of extreme heat plans, setting zonal targets for energy efficiency, piloting green buildings, district cooling and electric vehicles. But these baby steps need to be supported with more efforts and investments. There is a need to onboard the architects and urban planners to promote locally suited urban designs which are energy efficient. We are aware that concrete and steel are excellent building materials. They have helped us in providing permanent shelter to millions. But we are also aware of the fact that they play a major role in entrapping heat in the buildings. It's high time we start investing in the alternatives which are affordable. This makes a strong case for the developed world to handhold the developing countries in building their capacities and work towards transferring the requisite technologies which can improve the living conditions of millions. I welcome funding support from UNEP, Denmark and Cool Coalition to establish dedicated capacity in NIUA, National Institute of Urban Affairs, to help cities tackle cooling challenge and drive energy transition. This consortium aims to help the smart cities in creating extreme heat planning, integrate cooling into their urban planning, and lead the transition to sustainable, accessible, and climate-friendly cooling. This UNEP-led coalition is already preparing an urban cooling action plan in city of Gujarat, city of Rajkot in our Gujarat state. We look forward to continue working with UNEP, the Cool Coalition, and partners to replicate this in other cities. We hope that the leadership shown by cities in India will inspire others to take on the challenge, and look forward to hear about from their colleagues and collaborate with the cities which are working in this particular field. We also look forward to interact with all the distinguished speakers and participants of this event and build a comprehensive and collaborative action plan on heat, as we currently have many solutions on the table, but too few hands are putting them into practice. Now is the time to act and unleash the sustainable urban cooling solutions to beat the heat. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for delivering a wonderful keynote speech expressing the importance of the urban heat, but also indicating what India is, the government of India is planning to do under its various missions, especially the Amrut and the Smart mission. Now, I would like to introduce Ms. Sonia Litan-Kuni, who is the Deputy Executive Director of UNEP, and I request her to please deliver the keynote speech. Ma'am, the floor is yours. Please, you can deliver it from where yours.
Thank you, and thank you, Manesh. Good morning, Excellencies, distinguished guests, friends, and colleagues. Growing up in Jamaica made me really appreciate a strong sea breeze. For parts of the year, the combination of high humidity and high temperatures makes it incredibly hard, it appears, to get much done, especially as a kid studying. But the sea breeze was one such relief, and it was one of the benefits of living on an island in a part of the world with tropical weather. But most people don't live on tropical islands with these kinds of cool breezes. In fact, increasingly, they live in urban heat islands, in densely packed cities that are so good at trapping heat that they've become furnaces. Today, 1.7 billion live in urban areas and are exposed to extreme levels of heat. This number will rise dramatically as the planet gets hotter and hotter and more people move to urban areas. With cities heating up twice as fast as the global average, we're already seeing the catastrophic impacts on people's health. Extreme heat kills. It is linked to more deaths than all other climate-driven hazards combined. 365,000 deaths in 2019 alone. Just as the climate crisis is wreaking havoc with the Earth's ability to maintain a stable climate, extreme heat is pushing the human body beyond its ability to regulate its own temperature. The rising heat is also damaging our economies. By 2030, we believe heat stress will wipe out 2.4 trillion from the world's economy. It is also one of the biggest climate justice issues we face, exposing and deepening the growing inequality we see around the world today. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've entered a new world. A little more than 1 degree of global warming may not sound like much, but it means that the planet is already hotter than any world any human has ever known. Scientists are already beginning to question whether technically we can still use the word extreme to describe the heat waves we're seeing, like the ones this year in parts of Asia and Europe, because they're no longer rare. Indeed, they're something we expect to see more of as the climate crisis intensifies. The need to act is therefore crystal clear, but our response so far has unfortunately been largely inadequate. Today, 2.3 billion are on the verge of purchasing poor quality air conditioners. But air conditioners, as the additional secretary was just talking about, are a double burden when it comes up to climate change. They use HFCs, which are extremely potent greenhouse gases, and use a significant amount of energy. So, we are in a vicious cycle. The more we rely on mechanical cooling, the hotter our cities become, and the more emissions we release, which turns up the heat on the planet faster. The hotter the planet gets, the more energy we use to cool ourselves, and so the downward spiral continues. Clearly, we cannot air condition ourselves out of this crisis. Fortunately, as Additional Secretary Kumar pointed out, there are solutions at our fingertips, and it's those solutions that we're here to talk about today. Often, because today's crises are so interconnected, the solutions to one bring benefits to many. Tackling urban heat islands can improve people's health and well-being, boost productivity, reduce inequality, and tackle the triple planetary crisis of pollution, biodiversity, loss, and climate change. There are multiple ways to achieve this. Each city will have its own set of challenges and opportunities. But broadly speaking, cities need to think comprehensively by focusing on 3 overarching elements. 1, reducing urban heat. 2, reducing the cooling needs of buildings. And 3, improving the efficiency of cooling systems used by buildings. UNEP has developed a handbook that lays out how cities can do this, and this handbook is an encyclopedia of tried and tested ways to cool urban areas and is already being used by 16 cities to fight extreme heat. We know that these solutions works. For example, we know that green and blue infrastructure reduce urban temperatures. Trees provide shade to people and infrastructure, while water assets and planets release moisture that can cool the air. Green corridors in the Colombian city of Medellin have cooled areas by up to 4 degrees Celsius. In Seoul, the restoration of a water stream decreased temperatures by as much as 6 degrees. District cooling is another option. In Paris, a district cooling network replaces air conditioning and chillers by pumping cold water around the city. And passive building efficiency measures like orientation, insulation, reflection, shading, and ventilation can reduce a building's cooling load by more than 25% even in hot climates. So, by transforming the concrete jungles into urban forests, mandating green cool roofs in buildings, and increasing tree canopy cover, we can keep our cities cooler and make them more livable. Crucially, there is also a unique opportunity in the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol, where phasing down HFCs, climate warming gases used in the cooling industry. This phase down alone could avoid up to zero point 0.4 centigrade degrees of global warming by the end of this century. By promoting an approach that reduces demand and improves efficiency of the cooling alongside this HFC phase down, we can double the climate benefits of the amendment. With the right regulatory environment, governments can incentivize the private sector to market sustainable cooling solutions. UNEP stands ready to support governments to harness these new markets. The task before us is to bring these solutions to scale at the speed required without further warming the planet. That's the essence of what I believe we're here to discuss today, and why, on behalf of UNEP, I would like to express my deep gratitude to the Government of India for the leadership it has shown, and to the National Institute of Urban Affairs for organizing such a critical event. Aristotle once wrote that a city, like an individual, has a work to do, and that city is which is best adapted to the fulfillment of its work is deemed to be the greatest. The greatest cities we can build are those that put human well-being at the center of everything we do. We must now adapt them to that work. This is the great task that lies before us, and I'm confident we can succeed. We have the knowledge to succeed, so let us use it, and we have the tools to succeed, so let us pick them up. Let us begin. Thank you.
That was a brilliant speech. Bravo.
Thank you, ma'am, for this wonderful keynote address, stressing the importance of the multidimensionality of the challenge, especially the livelihood, and also the economy. But more importantly, putting people in the center is something which I think makes it more humane for everyone to start working towards it. And for that, we have with us a wonderful panel to discuss on the possible solutions and how we can get things to scale. We have the panelists together has more than close to 100 years of experience. So we have a lot to pick on from their experience and also from what they intend to do, both in India and also what's happening globally. Without further ado, we have with us Mr. Imani Kumar, who is the Deputy Secretary General of ICLEI and also the Executive Director of ICLEI South Asia Secretariat. Welcome, Mr. Imani Kumar. We also have with us Ms. Ellen Mevili and Linio, and she's the Chief Heat Officer, City of Athens, Greece, and she's also the Senior Urban Heat Advisor, Anstrock Resilience Center. Welcome, Linio.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We also have with us Ms. Joanna McLean-Massey. She is the Global Lead of Urban Disaster Risk Management and Land Governance Practice at World Bank. Welcome, Joanna. And we also have with us Ms. Heather House, Manager, Urban Transformation Program, Rocky Mountain Institute. Welcome, Heather. So, let me first turn to Linio, the Chief Heat Officer and also the Senior Heat Advisor of Anstrock Rockefeller Foundation Resilience Center. Linio, you've been working in this position of Chief Heat Officer, for quite some time, and you've also been working with the Greek capital, and your job requires you to make sure that the cooling is provided when the temperature increases beyond 40 degrees, and not to one or two people, but to all the citizens. And you have shown leadership in terms of bringing in technology, also creating partnerships, and also creating a platform where collaboration can take place. So why don't you take us through how through your leadership and also through the resilience approach, how you are managing it within Athens?
Is this on? Yes.
Yes.
Hello, thanks for having me here. I love listening to the two keynote speakers. Thank you both. It was wonderful. I think that part of the challenge for that chief heat officer is called to deal with in a city, and probably why it's important is that often cities that are used to high temperatures like Athens and many other cities, it's really, really hard to get people to take seriously heat exposure and how detrimental is for mortality and morbidity for a large part of the population. So it's important to have somebody that really tries to push the agenda of heat, I think, in local government. Exactly, because it's often like in the back of the priorities. And also the other aspect is that it's important because heat is has so many aspects that it influences in the functioning of a city. It's important to have somebody that can actually work horizontally, because most cities are organized vertically, and it's really hard to do things so that actually span from health and welfare issues to being able to approach the most vulnerable populations in the right ways, to infrastructure, to budgeting, and to basically all of it. I mean, a lot of different functions of the city are affected and have to participate in building resilience in relation to heat. So that's another thing. So in Athens, basically what I've been trying to do is breaks down in three different pillars. One pillar is awareness, the second one is preparedness, and the third one is redesign. So, which Sonia basically covered almost everything, but in Athens particularly, awareness, we've been doing, as far as awareness is concerned, for the first time this year, with scientists from Athens and the R-Stroke Resilience Center, we created this new categorization of heat waves, which I think is really a game changer for raising awareness about the dangers of heat, because this particular methodology that we used, which I think is very interesting, is that it doesn't have only meteorological data, but it has meteorological and mortality data and their correlation, so that each category is not just how hot it is, but actually has the impact of the heat inside the category from the beginning. So the risk is there within the category, which I think is really great for communicating the severity of the danger and of the issue. The other things also, but that's like the most important that we're doing for the awareness raising. In the preparedness, we have also a series of things that we're trying to do for the first time this year. A big part of it is collaborating together with the Hellenic Red Cross, which also was facilitated by the Red Cross and Red Crescent, the international thing. So this is also something that's really important, to really find collaborations in the city that can help you be really effective, because the preparedness has to do, it's all about making sure that the most vulnerable are prepared, are protected during the time. So it's the short-term stuff. So the Red Cross can play, because it has such acceptance and such great kind of validity among people in general. They can enter homes, for example. Like one of the things that we're doing that we have to do is to go knock on doors and enter homes and make sure that we can communicate and have access to people that live at home alone. For example, they told us this year that 83% of the people that die from extreme heat are people that are found in their houses dead. So this is it's a very important part of the whole equation, and so this is part of the preparedness plans, along with other things that we're trying. And finally, the redesign, blue and green infrastructures, bringing water to the surface. In Athens we have dry heat still, so water is easier to use than in humid environments to actually cool, together with trees. I mean, there are technologies and materials that also have been developed but are still like in the process of really innovate. We need a lot of innovation there also, but mostly nature and biodiversity back into cities in a radical way will be probably the only thing that can save our cities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Linio, for stressing the importance of awareness and taking all the way towards redesign. I think it's very important to look at heat differently, because right now when we go around talking to people, nobody knows that there is a heat wave going on in Katowice.
That's right.
So
That's right.
many of the participants are new to it, or for them 28 degrees is not a heat wave.
That's right.
For example, people coming from India.
or Athens. For
Or
that matter.
Athens.
30 degrees is fine.
Right. So just moving on, I would like to ask Imani ji, going from awareness to redesign requires a lot of policy transformation, and you've been working with a lot of local governments in the entire Southeast Asian region and South Asian region. What is required in terms of the policy to enable this transformation?
Thank you, Mahesh. I completely agree that I'm coming from India actually, as Additional Secretary Saab is talking about. We have 49 degrees centigrade in India, in Delhi this year. Never. I was living in Delhi for the last 30 odd years, but never we have seen 49 degrees. And very early, that's what I think Secretary Saab is talking about. In month of March itself, we have actually only summer season comes from late part of the May, and June and July we have monsoon already comes. But since beginning of the March, we have the heat wave started and going on. And as Mahesh ji is saying, in the morning, I got up at 4:30 in the morning today. I came yesterday only from Delhi, and I was sweating like anything in the hotel at 4:30 early in the morning, and I saw that the sun is already out, and it's hot. It's hot in the room, though there is air conditioning working, but I don't think it's really covering the entire room on that. So those are the situations what we are living in right now. And I say I'm so happy that both Additional Secretary in the Government of India and also UNEP Deputy Secretary General, she was talking about the things are there on place. And we just need to come as a partners and do the things on board. That's what the message was coming up. I completely agree with both those messages. And ICLEI, ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability, we are a city association all over the world, and we are partnering with UNEP and to take the things onto the ground. That is where I think we are coming into picture and helping the city governments on that. And the question what Mahesh ji is asked, like actually, how do we translate the guidelines or translate the tool what it has been shown by UNEP onto the ground is the major concern for all of us, I will say that, including the city governments, what I'm talking about. Yes, one point I agree completely, awareness is a major thing, but it also, how do we translate those guidelines what you talk about onto the ground is one thing I will talk about on that. For example, in Indian system, Indian cities talk about yes, we should have a 10 to 20% of green cover within the city, like any other city in the world. I'm a city planner actually. I can talk about that. It's written on the paper. But are you translating the 20% into onto the ground is what people wants to know, and cities wants to know that this thing. Or how do we do that actually? How do we translate that 20% on that? And I was talking to some of the people in Indian cities. I'm telling you, it's not that great science, rocket science what we are talking about, but how do we put trees? Every city in India says that yes, we are planting these many trees, but how many are there planting? How many of them are surviving for the future? This things is what it talks about. And the major concern is like, if I have to tell you that, yes, in most of the rural areas and all, you have the trees. In urban areas, you don't have even trees. Like if you have a major heat wave, you don't know where to go actually, even because you have either sit in a concrete air conditioned building, which is not good for the health issues. But if you want to come out of that and you have 48, 49 degrees centigrade on that. So how do we translate on paper guidelines to on ground this thing, and how do we implement that is one thing I think I prefer on that the cities, and we are started looking into that. How do we do that on that? The other thing which I just want to tell you is also on the yes, we have in most of the maybe another guideline which I just want, and government maybe should look into, and up to some extent they are looking into. It's also on the procurement guidelines. Like if you talk about at the city level on that, most of the times, even in developed countries, I'll say you talk about more on the L1, L2 actually, which is the good least this thing will win the contract and do the activities on that. But if you want to talk about, I think, I don't know, in Athens you are looking into a good technology also costs like good money actually with this thing. So whether the technology is more important than the least count or least cost situations, what we talk about. So this is another thing, I think maybe the procurement guidelines which we need to look into and start looking further, like to give the guidelines to the city governments on that. And third important point I just want to add here is also the awareness. I think again the point what my previous speaker said from the Athens side, not only just the city officials but also the citizens. I think that is most important. Why they should maybe have 2-3 trees in their backyard, and how do they keep them survive to take it forward on that. So what happens is, like when the citizen, when in an Indian system also, if we apply for a building approval, what we call it, like into a city government, we get like an approval, yes, saying that with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 conditions, maybe you need to fulfill these conditions and you are approved, your building plan is approved on that. But what happens is, whatever those conditions given, that there is no monitoring mechanism, up to some extent they are, maybe sometimes every 5 years they will check that one, what is happening or not happening. But most of the citizens, they don't look into whatever those conditions, whether they are fulfilled or not, this thing. So another monitoring and mechanism, I think maybe that is another angle which I don't know, maybe in Athens if you have something like that which we will look into on that. This is another point I just want to add here on that. I have 2 more minutes. Yeah. The other thing I just have, and Sir has mentioned that in Rajkot we worked actually with the city of Rajkot. We have supported them to come out with the cool action plan, what we talk about on that. But some of the some of the recommendations what we came out with the cities also on the building materials, actually what they use and what they should not use, actually those are the things. HSCs and all, I agree on that, ma'am, but also the building materials, I think Sir was talking about more on the steel and concrete thing in that. What can be the local materials? Actually, if you go back to 25-30 years back, all the buildings what have been constructed with those materials are all of them, I think even in Africa, even in India, actually I can talk about on that. So those are all maybe heat resistant buildings, or they may be cooled buildings without even air conditioners, which we have on that. So the local building materials, I think is another thing. And on the policy front, which I just want to say that maybe there should be a law from the municipal governments, from the local governments, saying that they should use only the local materials, not to import materials for construction of the buildings and other things. So this is another thing, actually, both on enforcing thing, actually one point, and also the building materials, what they use is that is another point. And my last point is, I just want to add here, maybe the governments are here, I think maybe to encourage the citizens. I don't know again what happens in Athens or other countries, to encourage the citizens, maybe some sort of an incentive should be there, even to the citizens, to come out with heat resistant buildings and other things. I don't know, I'm not saying that they should be given money to them, but I think some sort of, in India, in some of the cities, they talk about property tax rebate, property tax concessions they give, that up to 5%, Rajkot city is also giving on that. But because of non-monitoring the things on ground, so these incentives are, so those incentives what we talk about should have a link to implementation, actually. So it's not just simply on paper again, a 5% rebate on your property tax or other things on that. that. So this is another suggestion which I think we should look into on that. So I'll just stop here. Thanks for this thing. If you have any questions, I'm happy to come back again. Thank you.
Thank you, Maniji. I think the policy to practice is it's a marathon. It's not a 100-meter run where one can achieve it in a very short term. And thanks for stressing the importance of tendering and also the monitoring, and more importantly, how you can incentivize without the municipal corporation or the urban local body costing the urban local bodies quite a bit. I think that provides us a good segue to Ms. Joanna, who's looking in terms of unlocking finances, which is a big challenge, right? How do you incentivize cities, and how do you incentivize urban cooling solutions to make sure that there is an increased adoption of it, and what business models and financing mechanisms which World Bank is currently experimenting with, which has worked and which has not worked. Please, Joanna, if you could throw some light into it.
Is this on? Yes.
Yes.
Hi, everybody, and thanks for inviting me. It's really fascinating discussion so far. So from the World Bank side, thermal comfort for all is a priority, and we work across the world on different initiatives. But today I just wanted to take the chance, because we have the esteemed gentleman from the ministry as well, to touch on a report that we've done recently that will be upcoming for release on a roadmap for implementing India's cooling action plan. So really, how do you take that plan and implement and finance it? So I think what we've identified there, that really 4 areas where concessional and public financing can really be used to implement this agenda. And also we've looked at some of the policy actions and where we need more studies. So it's not an end story, it's a beginning. And where we need to unlock the market and create the incentives also for the private sector is key, because much of the financing will come from the private sector. And as the honourable gentleman mentioned, with rising incomes, increasing urbanization, also increasing need for cooling, that we're going to see with low access to cooling today in India, a huge need for investment here. And in this study, we estimated that the space cooling market potential in India is about 1.5 trillion by 2040. And we need the enabling framework for that market to take place. But it also can create jobs as well, and also opportunity for business, the Made in India approach for new technology. So the 4 areas, and we've heard them already, so I fear I'm going to repeat, but hopefully I'm just sort of consolidating what's been said. But the first one is obviously to avoid the need for cooling where you use passive cooling designs. And that brings in the point of how do you make the sustainable, efficient building materials available at scale. So the costing, but also availability. We know nowadays that the supply chains are extremely limited. So this local supply chain is key, as was mentioned. And then the second area is really promoting energy efficiency technology for cooling. And we know that in India, much of the cooling will still come from fans into the long term, right? So I think also looking at the building codes, looking at bringing down the adoption costs through bulk procurement as part of your housing programs for energy efficient fans, and in multi-stories aircon, energy efficient aircon. And as I said, this is an area I think India could show some real leadership for the whole region in terms of the Made in India approach. You've done it in cars, you've done it with vaccines, why not in energy efficient fans and aircon? That this is an area where you could show leadership. So I think those 2 points are very key for India as you're building your housing stock, which we know is happening today. And then the third area, already mentioned too, is district cooling. And that's will be especially important for greenfield developments and developments of major scale, obviously. But again, how can concessional financing or the public sector support this development of tri-generation cooling technology, I think will be key. And then finally, On urban planning, we've heard it already, but the honourable gentleman mentioned, how do we mobilize the urban planners, the architects to mainstream cooling from the beginning in our plans, in our urban design. And I think if we're also talking about addressing lock-in urban infrastructure, urban expansion, urban planning is key, but it also has other benefits, as we heard from UNEP, multiple benefits of compact urban design, both in terms of resilience, livability, and also greening. So I think these 4 areas are interlinked, but there are various actions at national and local level. There are various stakeholders. There needs to be a strategic plan, a political plan, an operational plan. So we need to start digging into how do you operationalize this at different levels. And I'm really glad to hear about this urban heat action platform. I think this would be really useful for a lot of our client countries, and I hope to hear more about it, and also the leadership from the Indian government on this topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joanna, for highlighting some of the key figures. That is the 1.5 trillion in terms of the possible economy, which it can cater to, the market it can cater to going forward, and also the importance of, being very strategic when you bring about something like district cooling, at least within the new greenfield developments which may be coming up. I think that provides us with a certain set of options, but I would want to go to Heather and ask her that RMI has co-led the development of Beating the Heat, right? And a sustainable cooling handbook for cities is also now in the preparation, and there is also a lot of technical guidelines which are being provided, policy guidelines and inputs to the ministry, to various agencies. So how do you see that getting implemented? Today we heard so many solutions, and I know it's some of it are being experimented, including the ones. I think planting trees is happening all around the world, or all across the cities. It is just that the trees are not surviving over beyond a year or so. So what are these additional low-cost, no-regret solutions? What are the options which can be scaled up, and how the scale can be sustained over time, given the current context? Because we need, I think what we all heard was the urgency of the matter is pretty much realized from the national government, from the development partners, from the investment banks. And what do you see, Heather? How do we go about it?
Great. Thanks for this question, and thanks for having me. Really happy to be able to be here and represent RMI as part of this really important collaboration in urban cooling. And just quickly, if you're not familiar with RMI, we're an independent nonprofit with a mission for a clean, prosperous, and secure low-carbon future for all. Our urban transformation program works very closely with climate-critical cities. We've had a big focus on the American Cities Climate Challenge, where we've provided technical assistance to dozens of cities and are starting to do that internationally now as well. So to your question on no-regret solutions, in the handbook, we discuss that cities should be taking a holistic approach, a whole systems approach to urban cooling and heat resilience. But there's a number of no-regret solutions for cities that they can take today that are sustainable and equitable. I'll name 3 that RMI is already working on with partners. And apologies if I think we're all kind of singing from the same songbook, so hopefully you all can leave here singing the same tunes. But the first that I'll share is replacing old and inefficient air conditioners with more efficient, low climate impact, and lower life cycle cost air conditioners is extremely important. And ensuring those customers can actually purchase more efficient appliances from the start. While cooling technologies like ACs support health and productivity, inefficient ones are actually driving up greenhouse gas emissions and are putting a strain on our power grids. The good news, though, is that there are a lot of options to drive these super efficient ACs that don't necessarily require policy changes. These could include things like shifting procurement practices to lower life cycle cost appliances, or innovative financing approaches and models that can help customers overcome that first cost barrier to adopting more efficient models. The second solution that I'll mention today is low-cost passive solutions like cool roofs, which has been mentioned. And this is super important, and it's extremely effective. In some cases, reducing indoor temperatures by up to 5 degrees Celsius. And of course, the green spaces and blue spaces that have been mentioned, they're actually the original no-tech cooling solutions, sort of the original no-tech cooling solutions. We've seen that urban forests and parks can be up to 7 degrees Celsius cooler than parts of the city without any green spaces. We've also seen that tree-lined streets can be up to 3 degrees Celsius cooler than their treeless counterparts. And these temperature reductions are extremely critical for vulnerable communities that have historically not had access to these types of solutions, and they have basically not the same type of access to active cooling technologies either. The third solution that I'll mention here is integrating heat resilience into ongoing urban planning processes. So, zoning and planning requirements can preserve and establish green and blue spaces and promote cost-effective measures like street trees and cool surfaces. RMI actually has some analysis that's forthcoming that's basically showing that if we scale up nature in cities, we could see more than $30 trillion in benefits by 2050 from less than $3 trillion in upfront investment. That's something like returning the US and China's GDP for just an investment of the UK's GDP. This is a massive potential value in urban nature, and it's an enormous and largely untapped investment opportunity that can support cooling and climate, biodiversity, and sustainable development goals. So I think even though these solutions are no regrets, their implementation oftentimes requires a lot of coordination across sectors, from public and private to different levels of government. And so, I think the global community, all of you, policymakers, solution providers, funders, investors, we need to come together to work on how to scale up these solutions so that especially vulnerable communities can actually realize them. I guess a couple last points here. We're currently working in India collectively to build a coalition with all these partners here at the table, NIUA, the Indian Ministry for Housing and Urban Affairs, UNEP, ICLEI. We're all working together to implement some of these solutions that I've mentioned and that I've outlined. Finally, I would sort of put out a call to action for funders like development finance institutions, real estate developers, insurers, and others to basically come together to find funding and financing solutions for cities that are needed to deploy these cooling solutions at scale. And stay tuned, RMI is going to be putting out that analysis that I mentioned earlier in a report this fall. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather, for stressing the importance of the benefits, the 2 trillion investment to 20 trillion in return. I think that sounds quite exciting to actually for many of these investment banks and also others to get into investing around cool solutions. It's also important that what you mentioned around energy efficiency, I think one of the recent studies which NIUA did across 126 cities, what we came to know was the cities which managed to do all these things, develop policies, implement policies, have a cool action plan, have the percentage green area increased, the per capita energy consumption comes down by 5x. So if Indian cities are growing are going to grow 3x, I think without doing much, just by adopting policies, developing a plan, and implementing simple, no cost, no regret, solutions is going to enable Indian cities to at least maintain or bring down the per capita consumption. of energy. I think so there is a value in investment, and there is a value in creating this partnership, this coalition with the support of the Indian government, and also there is a value in basically for us start doing things quite soon. So in that context, as we go towards doing things, probably I'll start from this side. Mr. Emaniji, please can you provide certain things? What are the key three things which policymakers, urban local bodies, or other stakeholders need to do?
Okay. What you put me on the spot actually straight away asking. I think things are by the citizens as well as the local governments. I think they now understand that what they need to do. It is not that they don't know the things, as I think all of speakers are also saying that things. But how do we bring maybe implementation? I think that is one thing is very much requirement. I stress on that point. I think that is one thing, and both our World Bank colleague and also RMI is actually saying that actually the next thing I think cities need money. It's not that it's easier for everybody, every city government. Yes, few cities have lots of money with them to implement, but most of the cities to take it forward, implementation, I think that is one thing. Not only just city governments, but also maybe the citizens, if they have to do some changes. Yes, I know the fans and maybe there are equipment is available, energy efficient equipment is there, but how do it costs a lot actually. It's not that the difference between a 3-star air conditioner to a 5-star air conditioner is the difference is a lot of money in that. So where do they get? Also on the green buildings, if I have to bring that another point for the citizens, if the developer or the builder comes out with a green building, actually to buy that green building comparatively normal building, it's also costs a lot actually. So where do we get money both for the city governments? Where do we get money for the citizens to take forward the implementation? So that's the second point. I just want to stress on that. And the third point, which I just want to take again from Athens model, I think what Athens heat officer, I hope I'm using the correct designation for you. I heard you previously also in one of the other session a few months back. Bringing together all the participants, I think that is most important. What I'm saying is, I know that national governments and we have provincial governments, local governments are there, but you also have to bring the private people, that private developers, you have to bring the builders on that, technology providers and the financiers. So if we can bring that, I think RMI is doing a little bit that, bringing together all the actors on one table and then start talking about how do we implement these actions on ground. I think that's the third point, or maybe that is the first point. I will stress it on that, bringing all the stakeholders together and then start working onto the second point and third point, what I'm saying on that. If I have to add one last point again, I think implementation is not just only the government's perspective, it's also on all of us also actually, whether I'm using 2 air conditioners or 3 air conditioners, because that is one thing. How do I bring it down? How do I bring from my side the fuel consumptions, or my side for the energy costs, energy consumption? So each individual also has a responsibility to work on that. Otherwise, these temperatures go up further. Maybe we will see 55, 56 degrees in next few years in Delhi and other parts of the world on that. Yeah, I'll just stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Maniji. And I think for stressing the importance of stakeholder coordination, I think in this complicated thing, and how we can bring about money for the cities and also for the citizens. With that, I'll move on to Linio. Linio, what are the 3 things which you think?
3? First of all, I should say to Manu Kumar that in Athens we have the same problems that you have. We have the wrong way of procurement. which leads to totally wrong kind of things. We have no follow-up afterwards to check if anybody did anything right with all of the things. Right? And the third thing that you said was also wrong in our, but I don't remember it now. So these things are very important. And so Imran Kumar basically said it all, the stakeholder engagement, designing things together with people and getting them involved afterwards. The idea of I was thinking that, to answer with the idea that, you have to create short-term, immediate action to save people, but also you have to have really a vision for the city. And this is something that is really important. Like they have to work on two, because politicians usually work on a very short horizon. So you really have to get them to buy in to doing things. But I think we've mostly covered it. The one thing that I think that we haven't covered, which I think is really important, which comes from the idea of implementation and design. I think that we need to, apart from financing and everything else, we need to build capacity. People don't know, both in the private sector and the public sector, how to design nature-based solutions. I mean, some do, but there's still few, especially within local government, unless you are in some, Swedish town or something. Very few people know how to really implement, to design and implement. And even if you get a super designer, then the people that are called to implement, they really manage to undermine it in 1,000 ways and end up doing something with cement in the end, which is really frustrating because they don't really know how. They don't know how to secure that they liability issues, and they don't know how to make money out of it. So these two things are really important, and we have to surpass these issues and fast. And so this is the only thing I would add to the previous speaker, which I think has basically covered everything else.
Thank you, Lino. I think you rightly pointed out the need for capacity, not only within the private and the public, but also across various segments. Right. Till the last person who's buying it. That's what we keep talking about, but that's also the person who's building it.
Yeah.
And cement. Yeah, that's the word which is right now you see it's being widely used and not rightly used. And
a friend, a colleague, Amit, he was telling me about a project they were trying to do in India, and somehow even though it was very perfectly designed, it somehow ended up being a cement thing, even though it was not supposed to be cement. But somehow, and in Greece it's the same, because that's what people know how to do. And it's really an uphill battle with that. Sorry to talk again, but I thought I'd just butt in, because it's very frustrating.
I think that's why we are all here, to make sure that we can express some of it, and probably the audience can come up with a solution how to overcome it. We don't have solutions for everything. Moving on to that, of course, how do we do this, Joanna? Cities have been asking for funds. Private sector, of course, they need funds, and then there is this soft funds, the technical assistance when it comes to capacity building, which you won't see the return immediately, but in the long term.
I think it's key that we really prioritize targeting to the most vulnerable first as the priority, because they are usually the ones that suffer mortality, morbidity during heat wave, right? And that will be different depending on the city, depending on the population, location, housing type, socioeconomic status. So really understanding who are the vulnerable groups in the city. And the reason I mention this in relation to financing is because that's where the soft financing and the incentives go. Because if you're talking about green buildings, fans, technology, you should be incentivizing thermal cooling for all, targeted the financing, the concessional financing for those that are at most need, right? So that would be my my strongest message, that it needs to be a just transition process. And then I think when you think about integrated solutions and long-term urban planning and building, that's where you can incentivize the private sector, the developers, and bring in the finance where people can afford it. So that would be my second point. And I think also, raising the awareness, preparedness for the heat is also part of raising awareness of the financing need and the market and the potential. So those would be my 3 points from my side. Thanks.
Thank you very much, John. I think we need to focus on the vulnerable, because those are most in need, and those are the people who probably the finances, all the soft finances, need to go first. I think. Thank you very much for highlighting it and stressing the importance around it. And Heather, finally to you, you're the one with the magic bullet.
Right.
How do we achieve scale? With all these things, you have a tool, you have a framework, and you have a platform right now with you, which is being tested. How do we achieve scale?
I feel like I should really underpin a lot of the points that have already been made here, but I think that when we talk about cooling, oftentimes people think about cooling technologies like the air conditioners that we've talked about, or district cooling. But as Sandra said in her keynote, we can't simply air condition our way out of this monumental extreme heat challenge. And so I think there's basically a whole suite of solutions ranging from citywide to household solutions designed to both reduce urban heat and cooling demands, while at the same time improving livability, productivity, resilience, and the health of our cities. Many of these solutions are cost effective and they have low barriers to entry, which we know, including the solutions we've discussed, like the urban greenery, cool roofs, and cool surfaces. However, what I really want to stress is that these solutions need to be targeted so that they actually have impact. In sort of emphasizing the point that Joanna made, lower income communities, or those that have been historically marginalized populations, oftentimes have less green space, and they also have lower quality green space compared to their wealthier counterpart neighborhoods. So we really need to be investing trees and other solutions in these neighborhoods that have been historically underinvested, and they can benefit from these solutions now. But I think most importantly, we need to be engaging the communities in the solution making. So I think, if you're a city or a local government out in the audience today, and you're looking to implement cooling solutions, I would recommend you to come talk to any of us up here after the panel. I think, as you know, we're obviously working on a city program in India, but I think we'd all welcome the opportunity to support other communities around the globe.
And go to the platform.
Yes.
And go to the platform.
Thank you very much for that. And I would now hand it over to Ms. Deputy Secretary General UNEP to give her final remarks and words.
It's not final remarks, but I have enjoyed listening to the panel, and there is a convergence, I believe, of ideas. But one of the litmus tests I use as someone in the environmental and science field is I speak to my 82-year-old mother, and I try to figure out, as she follows me around the world, does she get what I'm doing? And many times she doesn't. So to the point when you were discussing your action plan about stakeholder awareness, etc., I think there is still a bit to be done about changing consumer behavior, because I think at the mayor level, I think that we're having quite a bit of success in the thinking around the systems and the mechanisms. I'm not sure that we're having as much success in people connecting the dots, that what they're doing is having an impact on this thing that they hate, which is heat. I don't think it's really connecting as yet. So perhaps with all that we're doing, which is, I think, correct, and that's what I said, we still need to make sure that we empower consumers to understand that they need to change behaviors. Mm-hmm. And that they, to get them kind of out of the victim approach that it's happening to me and I can do nothing about it, to these are the tools and things I can use. So I think there is a slight missing gap between, how we are building the applications and the analysis and working with governments, and that is important. But I think we need to push private sector also to come out with new products and tell consumers how this can help them, along with the greening and the tree and the blue technology. So I just wanted to say that, because as I was thinking, I don't know if my mom really fully understands, and she will hate me for using her as the type, but how she too is impacting. So just want to mention that.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Executive Director. I think it's important the last mile connectivity is achieved, and it is these people who are most vulnerable. People who are aged, people who are young, and women, and they need to be informed. And if they don't understand, then probably we lose out our audience. We have with us Shri Sanjay Kumarji. So your final remarks.
I would like to view this entire debate on city cooling action plan as how we govern our cities. If we talk from Indian perspective, for quite long after independence, India was viewed as a country where majority of the people live in rural areas. And the realization that urban areas also are important, it took almost 50 years for the country to realize. We came up with the 74th Amendment in the early 90s. After that, lot of things have happened, but still that's a work in progress. In fact, if I talk about from experience from my state, Andhra Pradesh, there initially the mayors used to be directly elected, because to my mind, unless we make the city governments responsible, we make them feel that they are doing something important, we will not find solutions for urban issues, including this the topic which we are debating today. But somehow what happened that the mayors were always viewed as political adversaries by the state legislature representatives. We went a step back and we downgraded the position of mayor by shifting from direct election to indirect election. But of course, this issue has been identified. Recently there was a big conclave in Shimla in Himachal Pradesh, where urban governance was discussed quite detailed for 2 days. Our Honorable Prime Minister also participated. In fact, he was there for 2 days. We have identified the issues. And to my mind, to make the urban governance strong, that is very much important to take care of urban problems, including the issue what we are discussing about. Second part, I would like to state that the entire paradigm of building design and urban planning needs a change. If we look at the European cities and US cities where we see skyscrapers with glass facade, but we should understand the theme behind them, because these are the cold countries. They want to trap and conserve as much heat as possible. But the same thing is being copied in not only in India, in even the hot across the world. Just now all the speakers spoke about Indian heat, where we say that 45 plus temperatures were almost for 30-35 days. In that scenario, look at the buildings what we have constructed not only in Delhi, in Hyderabad, in Gurgaon, in Mumbai, the amount of cooling load we are putting on the system. So how to do about that? It's not only the city government. We have got association for every freelance professional in our country, the architects, the urban planners. There has to be a formal system of engagement with them to sensitize them. Because to my mind, awareness and sensitization is very much important in this scenario. And third part, I would like to say that technology transfer I would like to do. I'm not looking for technology transfer only from the foreign countries. Since we're talking about buildings, India has Indian Institute of Technology, Roorkee, which is supposed to be in top 3 civil engineering institutes across the globe. But where are we like, where we need to put more effort? We need to formalize the engagement of these educational institutions and the governments. When I say the governments, it are both at all the three layers, national, state and city. Because to my mind, we have low-cost solutions in our educational institutions. We have IITs, so many engineering colleges are there. In fact, we boast about the highest number of qualified professionals when it comes to software, civil engineering and mechanical engineering. Educational institution, I remember my London School of economics days where there was a formal system of engagement between London School of Economics and London Municipal Corporation. There used to be 3-day conclave every year where the LSC used to discuss and disseminate and make aware to the corporation officials what are the new technologies. Somewhere we are not working on that. We need to work more. So these are my 3 takeaways from this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for stressing the importance of governance, building bylaws, and also, initiating actions at scale. With that, I guess we have had a wonderful panel talking about heat, and we are still left with some time. I hope you all make use of it by meeting them and discussing with them in person rather than asking questions one by one. So with that, I thank Ms. Sonia Litton-Koni, Deputy Executive Director, UNEP, and Shri Sanjay Kumarji, Additional Secretary, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India, Mr. Rimani Kumarji, Deputy Secretary General, ICLEI, Local Government for Sustainability, and Executive Director, ICLEI South Asia Secretariat, and Ms. Linio Mivili, Chief Heat Officer, City of Athens, Greece, and also Senior Urban Heat Advisor, Artsrock Resilience Center, and Joanna McLean Massey, Lead Urban Specialist and Global Lead Urban Disaster Risk Management and Land Global Practice, World Bank, and Ms. Heather House, Manager Urban Transformation Program, Rocky Mountain Institute. Thank you all once again, and thank you audience for being there patiently and listening to the talk.